hurricane warning remains in effect.
Welcome to the premiere of Season 4 of the Gospelovergimmicks podcast. Today, we're going to do a little learning about dispensationalism. Let's get after it. Well, howdy. Welcome to a brand new season of Gospelovergimmicks. Been going a whole month. Y'all must be ready to get back at it, because I know I am. I'm your host, Richard Storm Norman, here to tell you everything I know and some things I highly suspect. So you're still stuck with the same old host, still stuck with me. Y'all like that intro? Now that's not going to be the permanent intro. All that, special sound effects and stuff I did. I better go check my levels. They're pretty high, but they're not bad. But all those special sound effects and stuff I did in there, that's not going to be the normal intro. That's just a special. But, the regular stuff that if you listen to the podcast and you're used to the thunder and then the intro, all that from that forward we're keeping. But the stuff before that was just special. Something I did for today. So I thought it was pretty cool, and it took me a while to gather all those sound effects together. Today we're going to start a series on dispensationalism. It was last season, probably almost halfway through last season or something. Somebody requested, said it might be a good idea to do a series on dispensationalism. I'm still not sure if we're going to do a series, but that's the goal at the moment, because she was like, you can do an episode per dispensation. I'm not sure. I guess, I haven't read Larkin's book. I haven't read all these books I have about dispensationalism, so I'm going to tell you right now, I'm no expert on it. But so if I can get enough information per dispensation to do a series, because if I gotta make it a certain amount of time. I can't just spend 10 minutes on a topic. I want to go a little longer than that. But if I can find enough information to do that, then that's what we're going to do. So we'll see if that happens today. We're just going to do a brief introduction, because I don't want to start talking about dispensationalism, and there's people I know there's people listening who don't even know what it is. So we're going to get into that and talk about that a little bit later. Just a little brief introduction, and then next week we'll jump in at feet first. Before we go any further, though, about that, hang on. How are y'all doing? Doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. Still hot at work. I know. If you're new to the podcast, I live in Florida, so it's hot. But the good thing is we're right knee deep in afternoon thunderstorms. That's what happens in Florida during the summer. It gets so hot and humid during the day that it builds up until around 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Thunderstorms just appear, and so that knocks the temperature down. So I can't complain about that. Just sitting there at the shop, sitting on my mower, watching it rain and not dying of a heat stroke. So, the wedding thing, y'all know I announced last season, back in June, I announced that I was getting married. That's going along nice. It's going along pretty good, seeing as I don't really have to do anything. But yeah, it's going along pretty good. We started doing the registry last night. That was kind of fun. But that reminds me, I'm going to be taking a few weeks off. Obviously, I can't be doing a podcast while I'm on honeymoon or whatever. So, October 28th, these are the Mondays, because that's when the podcast comes out. It's on a Monday. October 28th, my light's going to die already. But that's what I get for not charging the batteries. Monday, October 28th, the Monday after the wedding, not going to do a podcast there. And then the following Monday, November 4th, not going to do a podcast because I'm going to be coming back I'll be back from the honeymoon at that point, and obviously I'm not going to be able to do prep for an episode on the honeymoon. So I'll just turn that light off. Y'all can just deal with the dark. So those are the two that I'm for sure not going to be doing a podcast on. So mark them in your calendar. Also, I may miss a few episodes or have some late episodes this season due to wedding preparations and stuff that you just got to do when you're having a wedding. So also, if I can get someone to finance me for a house, I'm having a little bit of a problem with that. But if we can get finance for a house, then we're going to have to look at houses. And if you've done it before, I've never done it before, but if you've done it before, it's taxing. It's a taxing experience. So there's a lot going on in my life this season. So I'm just warning y'all, some episodes might get missed, some episodes might be late. That's not I don't intend on it. I'm just letting you know it's possible that it could happen. So I didn't have much time during July to make any major changes to the show. Like I wanted to have the logo redesigned and stuff. Actually, it was July 4th where my Sunday school teacher told me he was going out of town for like 3 weeks. So I taught Sunday school all month long, which works out great because I'd rather do it. It's going to be a lot easier to teach Sunday school when I ain't doing a podcast. So that worked out pretty good. So I've been teaching Sunday school all month long. So not a whole lot that got done that I wanted to get done on the podcast. And obviously the website didn't get finished. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with that thing. I'm thinking about scrapping everything I've already done and just having Wix make it for me, because I don't know if I'm ever going to get around to finishing it. But we're going to order some stickers here soon. I'm just going to reorder the ones we had, and we'll get back into doing some sticker giveaways and stuff like that. But I am happy to announce, if you saw it on the Facebook page, you already know, but I am happy to announce Gospelovergimmicks podcast is now on Spotify. We are on Spotify. Is my chair sinking? So that's one more place you can find us at, on Spotify. I should have wrote that down so I could tell y'all at the end of the show. But if you're on Spotify, you can find us on there, and it's great. Been wanting to get on Spotify for a long time, and it wasn't that hard at all. It was actually pretty easy. It was easier getting on Spotify than it was getting on iTunes, I'll tell you that. So I'm working on some bonus content for the patrons. I know I only have 4, so there's only 4 of y'all out there listening to this. I'm working on some bonus content. I know a lot of other podcasts that use Patreon, and other YouTube channels and stuff that use Patreon. And what they do is they come out with some perks for their patrons, because they're supporting them financially. So they come out with maybe a bonus episode of the podcast or something like that they do, or anything. So I'm trying to figure out, for the last year, because we've been on Patreon for a year now, I've been trying to figure out what can I do that's not, because I don't have a lot of time to spare. What can I do? And then I come up with an idea. I'm not going to tell you what it is, because I'm still working out the details. But it's going to be a monthly thing I do that it'll be on Patreon, so only the patrons can get it. So if you want to get it, you're going to have to become a patron. But only the patrons can get it, and it'll be on Patreon if y'all want to go check it out. But I've not ironed out all the details yet, so I'll keep y'all posted on that. And I almost forgot. We're going to start this podcast off, like I said, we was going to last season, the end of last season. Let's give away a Bible. Who wants a Bible? Let's give one away. This is the KJV note-taking Bible from Holman. I gave away one of these before. I think I when I did ministry shout outs on the what was that season finale of last season, when I did the ministry shout outs, I shouted out the word nerd, and I think the last time I gave one of these away, she won it. So I've given one of these away before. It's the KJV note-taking Bible from Holman. I'll show you. It's a bonded leather, but it's like board. See, it's almost like a hardback, but not, if that makes any sense. It's got one ribbon, brown and black cover, stitched around the edges, 3-piece here. No gilting, it's just white page edges. And I'm guessing it's like an 8-point font. It's not a humongous font, it's an 8-point, but it's got lined margins, if I can hold it up. So you see it's got lined margins in the side so you can take your notes. And I saw pictures of the word nerd using hers on her Instagram page, and she probably done got this thing filled up by now. But yeah, so that's what we're giving away. The KJV note-taking Bible from Holman Publishers. So if you want it, you know what to do. You're going to have to answer a question down in the comment section. What shall my question be? What shall my question be? Let me think of one real quick, and I'll edit out the gap between now and when I finally decide what the questions are going to be. Okay, here's my question. You're going to have to answer it in the comments if you want to, and that's how you enter the contest. Unless I'm going to post this on Facebook too, so if you want to enter on Facebook, you can do it that way. But what's your favorite hymn? If you got a favorite hymn, let me know in the comments, and that's how you'll be entered to win this Bible. How about you? So, real quick before we get into it, I want to let everybody know who's new here. This might be your first time tuning in. You know, I try to do this every now and then, and since it's the season premiere, I figure I should probably do it. Independent Fundamental Baptist, King James only, dispensational, pre-trib rapture, you know, all that stuff. That's me. So if that's not your cup of tea, that's cool. You know, I understand if that's not your cup of tea, but I'm King James only. If you're not, that's fine. Like I always say, that's between you and God. But if that's not your cup of tea, no hard feelings, you know what I'm saying? But you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to stay. Anybody can watch these videos, anybody can listen to this podcast. I just want to let you know what perspective I'm coming from, so you'll know. If you're not that way, we're probably going to butt heads at some point. You're probably going to be listening and be like, oh, that ain't right. I don't agree with that. So because I don't like listening to podcasts and I don't know, and then they start talking about, you know, Calvinism, and I'm like, I didn't know y'all was Calvinists. And not that I would stop listening for that reason, but I would like to know ahead of time stuff like that. I'm not Calvinist, okay? So you ain't gotta worry about that either. So that's me. That's the theological perspective we're coming from. You probably guessed it already just from the name of this episode. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about dispensationalism. So before we begin our dispensational series, if that's what I decide to do, I thought it might be a good idea to go give kind of a crash course in dispensationalism, you know, because there's possibly, most likely, some people listening who don't know what it is. Maybe if you just got saved and whatnot, you don't know what it is. So also, let's keep in mind that I do not claim to be an expert on this. Let me tell you, up until 5 years ago, I didn't even really know what this was. And I grew up in a dispensational church. But apparently they just never felt like teaching it to us. So we're going to be learning together. You know, we're going to be learning together because I don't know it all. So if you're like, well, that ain't right, just keep in mind, we're learning together here. So dispensationalism, definition: belief in a system of historical progression as revealed in the Bible, consisting of a series of stages in God's self-revelation and plan of salvation. So, dispensationalism basically is different periods of time where God worked in different ways. Okay? And that one part about plan of salvation, I don't really agree with that part either. Most dispensationalists, they had to choose a word that was super long. Most dispensationalists agree to 7 dispensations. I'm leaning toward 8 myself, but I've heard people 7, 8. I think Clarence Larkin taught 7. Some people taught 8. Some people, I think, even believe in 9. But I'll let you know in a minute why I believe there's 8. But like any other theological system, not everybody agrees. You can have 2 Calvinists sitting next to each other and they won't agree with each other on everything. That's just human nature, I suppose. But not everybody agrees, to the dispensations and how many there are and stuff like that. But here's the ones that are the 7 that are, the basic ones that everybody understands. Innocence, the dispensation of innocence, which went from creation to the fall, so basically the Garden of Eden, innocence. Second, the dispensation of conscience, which was from the fall to the flood. Next is the dispensation of human government, from the flood to the Tower of Babel. Then the dispensation of promise, from Abraham to Moses. The dispensation of law, from Moses to the crucifixion. And then the dispensation of the church, from the crucifixion to the rapture. Now, some people call that the dispensation of grace, but I disagree with that, because God's grace has always been evident in every dispensation, so I like to call it the church dispensation. And then the dispensation of the kingdom, which is the millennial reign. Now, the reason I think there might be 8 is because of the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation period. I think that might be its own dispensation, because it don't fit in the church dispensation, because the church is gone. We've been raptured out at that point. So it don't fit in that dispensation, and it don't really so much fit in the millennial, the kingdom dispensation, though it might. Like I said, we're both going to be learning here. So dispensation requires a literal interpretation of the Bible. A literal, like I've said before, take the Bible literally unless it's impossible to do so. Like if you come across a passage where like, that's impossible for me to take that literally, then okay. But everything else, if it says that God flooded the earth and killed everybody but Noah, take it literally. If it says that a whale swallowed Jonah, take it literally. I've heard people say, oh, that didn't really happen. So it requires a literal interpretation. A lot of people these days, they don't like interpreting the Bible literally. They like to take all this stuff in here that seems outrageous and be like, well, it's not really, it didn't really happen. It's just an allegory. Like they're just taking away from God. Like you're saying God couldn't do that? Is that what you're saying? Like they want to be hip and cool with the with the modern crowd who don't believe in that kind of stuff. Well, maybe if we just tone down, some of this stuff, they'll accept us. They won't. They won't accept it. Anyway, already this far in, I'm getting off on things. Anyway, so 4 times the word dispensation is mentioned. First time, 1 Corinthians 9:17. I got thumb index. Check that out. I got a new Bible. Got thumb indexing on it. 1 Corinthians 9:17. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward, but if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. Ephesians 1:10. That in the dispensation of the fullness of times he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. Ephesians 3:2. If ye have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God, which is given to me youward, how that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery, as I wrote afore in few words, whereby when you read ye may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ. Colossians 1:25. Whereof I am made minister according to the dispensation of God, which is given to me for you to fulfill the word of God. So Paul admits that a different dispensation has started with him. And then 2 Timothy 2:15, y'all know this verse because I've said it, I've quoted it many a times on this podcast. New Bible with the pages sticking together. Y'all know what I mean. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So dispensations rightly divide the word of truth so you can understand it better. I'm telling you right now, if you're going to have a much easier time understanding the Bible with looking at it through a dispensational view than you will not doing that. You gotta remember, all the Bible, the whole Bible was written to you, but not all of it is written for you. And we're going to mention something about that in just a minute. The most obvious dispensation that everyone can agree on, basics, Old Testament and New Testament. So if you believe that things in the New Testament are done differently than they are in the Old Testament, then you already kind of believe in dispensational already, So a testament can't begin until the death of the testator. Hebrews 9:15 and 16. And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the First Testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. So the New Testament didn't begin till Jesus died. So one thing that people don't understand is that the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are like, oh, that's in the New Testament. Well, not technically. They were still under the law. The New Testament didn't begin until Jesus died, so they weren't in the dispensation of the church like we're in now. They were in the previous dispensation of one of the law. They were still under the law. That's why Jesus talked about he came back not for Gentiles, but for Jews. Then we got our hyper-dispensationalism. You might hear that term. Or people that think that you can only get doctrine for the church, since we're in the dispensation of the church. You can only get doctrine from the church from the Pauline epistles. Only the Pauline epistles. You can't get church doctrine anywhere else. That's what hyper-dispensationalists believe. Then you got ultra-dispensationalists, which I didn't even know existed until I heard about it a few weeks ago. Ultra-dispensationalists say you can only get doctrine from Paul's prison epistles, only the ones he wrote in prison. So I just wanted to throw those differences out for you, because I'm not saying I ain't jumping into hyper and ultra and all that. Just regular plain old dispensationalism is fine for me. Most of the time when someone thinks they have found a contradiction in the Bible, it's because they're comparing different dispensations. They're like, oh, well, this over here says this, and this over here says this, and they're different. They don't say the same thing. Well, most of the time it's because that one statement is for a different dispensation than the one this one's in. That's why it's different, because God's working a different way in the law. Obviously, we don't have to fulfill the law in order to get to heaven anymore, because Jesus died for our sins. Some opposing theological views are due to the same reason. You have this denomination over here believes this, and this denomination believes that, and most likely it's the reason because they're getting their doctrine from a book that was written a different dispensation, and God was working a different way than he is in the church age. And another thing we need to understand before we begin, Israel is not the church, and the church is not Israel. That's another episode we're going to do later this season on replacement theology. There's some people out there, mostly people who reject people that reject dispensationalism, that teach replacement theology, that God's done with Israel. They rejected the Messiah, so he's done with them. So all the promises God made to Israel for the church now, and that's just false. That's not true. God's not done with Israel, as you can plainly read in Scripture. But so Israel is Israel, church is church. They're not the same thing. So that's all for today. Next week we'll get deeper into, hopefully, we'll get a little bit deeper into the different dispensations, starting with the innocence, the dispensation of innocence. So we'll get into that next week. So that's going to be it for this week's episode. Appreciate y'all joining me on the season premiere. And I hope you liked all the updated music and whatever the little sound effect things are that transition back and forth and whatnot. So come join us next week, we'll get started talking about dispensationalism. No expert, so we'll see how this works out, okay? So don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/gospelovergimmicks. If you want to go there, you can get in on the Bible giveaway there if you want to. And, that's mainly where I post things, announcements and stuff like that, whatever. I'm posting on Facebook most of the time. You can follow us on Instagram too, at gospelovergimmicks on Instagram, and every week I post a little image on there letting you know what's coming up on next week's episode. And you can follow us, I guess I'll still say it, on Twitter at GXG_ministries, even though I don't really post anything there. But I do post the episode there, so if you want to listen to the audio, it goes up on Twitter automatically. What else is there? I ain't done this in a month, so I'm trying to remember. I didn't write it down. Email, you need to email me a question about something. Got something you need to tell me, or you want to learn more about how to get saved. gospelovergimmicks@gmail.com is how you can get in touch with me. Patreon, if you want to support the podcast, the ministry, you want to support us financially, patreon.com/gospelovergimmicks is how you can do that. We got 4 patrons: Joanna Garrett, Roger Waters, Leanna Williams, and Rusty Williams. And we're going to take some of that patron money sometime this season, and we're going to do something good, something to glorify God with it sometime this season, as soon as I figure out what that's going to be. So I appreciate y'all joining me today, and I hope y'all come back next week as we start talking about dispensationalism. Super exciting stuff, I know. Till next time, take up your cross, carry on. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame.